Welcome to a spooky episode of Lace Reviews. It's once again Halloween, the season is upon us, and although I already did make a short video where I just recommended you to watch Halloween 3 because it's quite a masterpiece and I really think you should watch it. I think it's a very, very underrated film, and in that video I actually called it probably the most underrated horror sequel of all time. Bold words, a bold statement, but I think I will stand by it. You can prove me wrong, but for now I'll stand by it because it's quite a good movie. So what will I do in this video? I still don't have really the time to do a proper horror movie review like I did last year, where I did cover Auntie Meat Pies and Hack-O-Lantern. I will link both of those videos in the description, so you can see those if you want to. Two movies that I can't recommend for different reasons. This video instead will be me recommending 3 movies you can watch for Halloween. 3 movies that I think have good Halloween vibes for different reasons and should be good watches for this Halloween. I did try to pick 3 films that you might not have heard of before, or at least if you have heard of them, maybe you didn't actually watch them. And the first film I have for you is the oldest one in the bunch. It is Don't Go in the House from 1979 by Joseph Ellison. A director who only made one other movie, so you know you're in for a good time. If you do look up reviews of this, if you do look up its score, it doesn't look great. But I will say this is a movie, it's one of those late 70s, early 80s horror movies that have that very great urban or suburban horror feel to them. Not necessarily so much like Halloween, that's a very different feel, but it's a bit like if Driller Killer meets Psycho. It has that big mansion where it's a lonely man who lives with his mom. Again, it's a movie where you follow the antagonist, like you follow the antagonist in Driller Killer, like you follow the antagonist in Maniac. There are all those movies that came out around this time where you do follow the antagonist that are low budget. Of course, Psycho is much older, but I'm talking about the other films here that are low budget, that are very grimy, very dark in the themes, very, honestly, also quite often very misogynistic, that have that very nasty feel to them, but also an aesthetic that is lost in time. We don't really have that aesthetic in movies that much more anymore. Also, partly because cameras today are so good that even bad-looking places tend to look much better than show with worse cameras, worse lighting and everything. And Don't Go in the House is one of these New York urban horror films. It does take place in Long Island, but it's New York enough. And it's creepy, it's unsettling, it's a bit campy. One of those movies that's mostly there for the kills and some of the great visuals towards the end. It's a bit slow at times. It's not exactly a masterpiece, but it is a really good Halloween feel movie. It has the Halloween atmosphere that I'm looking for and that I'm here to recommend to you. It is a creepy little movie, a slightly disturbing little movie, and there's some of the ideas in this film and some of the executions where I would say, yes, I have not seen that in other movies, and it's quite an interesting take on the genre, whereas, of course, it doesn't exactly reinvent the wheel, but it does take it for one hell of a spin, and I think that's why I can recommend it to you.
Don't go in the house, because the people who live there aren't people.
The second film I have for you is the newest, and probably at least for a younger audience, the most well-known of the bunch, the one you might actually have seen or at least have heard of, and that's Freaky from 2020. It is by Christopher Landon, who has made a lot of terrible movies, but don't really ignore them, because this is not one of his terrible movies. This is quite a great movie. And I think it's quite good despite of his involvement. Because yeah, the plot is very, very simple. The dialogue is not necessarily great. The cinematography is very mediocre. It doesn't reinvent the wheel. But what it does is it hires 2 amazing drivers for the car this time. And that is Vince Vaughn and Catherine Newton. Those 2 leads are insanely talented in this movie. They give amazing performances. So the title Freaky does borrow from the Freaky Friday concept, where an older person swaps bodies with a younger person, and there's this ticking clock element for them to swap back into their respective bodies. And often what happens in these films is one of them wants to swap back, one of them doesn't want to swap back. But the difference is, of course, in this film, it's a serial killer played by Vince Vaughn who swaps bodies through this ritualistic dagger by pure incident or coincidence or accident with this young teenage girl played by Catherine Newton. So it is a high school comedy horror slasher that, whereas it doesn't exactly take place during Halloween, it has that vibe. It is a funny movie to watch, but it's also a gut-wrenching at times. It has some really good kills. It has some terrifying gore effects because, of course, it's a high school horror. So you want to see the jocks get their comeuppance. You want to see the mean girls get their comeuppance. And yeah, we get all of that because we do have this serial killer first as Vince Vaughn, then as Catherine Newton, and it really does play well on these two characters because Vince Vaughn does an amazing job playing a teenage girl. He's really, really good at that. He's really entertaining in that role and quite believable, I would say. And Catherine Newton, yes, she doesn't have to do as much because the serial killer she's playing is a very cold, not necessarily that calculated, but a serial killer that doesn't talk much, who just looks menacing and who laughs when killing and enjoys the killing and is calculated and understands the opportunities it gives a serial killer to be a young woman who is suddenly inconspicuous and can carry out these killings at a much higher efficiency than before when you're a creepy old man. But also the limitations of having a much younger, weaker body compared to an older body. So it has these concepts and limitations and everything that it plays with very well. So yeah, this is a very straightforward film. It doesn't do anything new or anything, but it is very entertaining and should be something that should be fun to watch with friends for Halloween. The performances are just stellar. I had a lot of fun. I watched this movie several times and I love it every single time. I hope you'll love it too. It's a good little film. Freaky, watch it.
How's that feel?
And the final film I have for you today is probably the one you have the least likely to have heard of before, and that is Bro Massacre III from 2015. It is directed and involves and produced by a bunch of guys, and I'm not going to name all the names, but they are the people behind 5 Second Films. I'm not sure you have seen them. They were quite big on YouTube around that time. And yeah, made funny or otherwise interesting videos that lasted 5 seconds. They were in the 5 Second Films. This is a parody comedy slasher that takes the whole 80s slasher genre and takes it for a little spin. Whereas, yes, it does have some of the issues of being a self-aware parody that doesn't always good when you try to mock a concept and parody it and you're a bit too self-aware about making a bad movie. This film does at times fall into that trap, but mostly stays clear from it, which is why I enjoy it. It has this really intriguing idea that I like, that yes, it is a sequel. It's not just the second installment, it is the third installment. It is Bro Massacre III, after all. In this film, the 2 preceding movies have, of course, happened. They just don't exist in real life. But it does play on the tropes of being a third installment, like you see in Halloween and Friday the 13th, where some of the characters that escaped events in earlier films are traumatized by it, or try to go on living, or are haunted or stalked by whatever entities in the past haunted them. Usually, of course, it's the same entity, but some of these movies, of course, it's a copycat killer and everything. But it really does play well with this concept. Yes, it is low budget, intentionally bad looking. It is trying to get that shot on Sestero vibe where, yes, it does look bad. It does look like a lost VHS tape you find at a garage sale. But I think it's fine. It does add to the aesthetics of the film. It does add to this vibe of being a D-tier slasher film that nobody was like. Maybe it was screened in one cinema in the 80s. And that is the vibe it's going for, and I think it gets it very well. It is, of course, not perfect. It has a very strong beginning, and it has a very strong end, and a lot of really weird and cool things happen. Some amazing kills, some really weird things. A lot of, again, they play a lot around with this. Okay, so there are already 2 movies in the franchise, and it plays off of what happened in the past movies, and there's some flashbacks, but also things that are not as well established that you as an audience should know, but of course you don't know because you haven't seen the other films. And yes, it really does play with these things quite well. Of course, also the movies back then would often have flashbacks because not everybody watched every single installment. So when you do go in and watch Friday the 13th Part 2 or 3 or 4, sometimes they do start with a flashback so you see what happened in the previous film just so you're not completely lost. And that's also what this movie does. It is just a very faithful parody and take on the 80s genre, slasher genre, that I really like. And then it does a lot of more modern things with it that I'm not going to spoil. But it is just fun. It is a fun film. Probably not that horrifying, just a lot of fun to watch with some friends. And the reason why I watched it, and that ties into the whole creation of this channel, this YouTube channel, Laser Reviews, it does star Greg Sestero. And the reason why I started Laser Reviews is that I was gonna see Greg Sestero present The Room and Midnight Valley, and I was just curious, okay, what other movies has he actually made? Because I'd only seen The Room before, and then I started watching all the movies he had made. I realized, okay, so he's in Puppet Master 6. Then I should probably watch the other Puppet Masters, but okay, actually now I watch all these Puppet Master movies. Should I? I'll make an Excel spreadsheet so I can look at horror movie franchises and see what movies I like in them, so it's easier to recommend franchises or horror movies to other people. and then also just to find out which ones I should rewatch. This was before I was on Letterboxd, so yeah, that's just how I started. And maybe I should take this concept and put it on YouTube, and that's how I started. It's been a long journey. So one of my very early videos, it's a very different way of making videos that I do today, but I do have this whole Greg Sestero video, and I will link to it in the description. That's also is probably going to be flashing up here. So yes, do Bro Massacre 3 if you can get your hands on it. It's a lot of fun. I can really recommend it to you. It might not be the easiest movie to find these days, but it's fun. But I do want to say that these movies are not masterpieces. Don't go in expecting genre-defining movies. Don't go in expecting the best horror movies or horror comedies or slashers you've ever seen. I just want to highlight 3 movies that I think could deserve a bit more love. I think all of these 3 movies sit at around 3.5 on my Letterboxd, which for me makes a solid watch. Definitely a watch if you haven't seen these movies before. Definitely a film I can recommend to you. So I do hope that if you listen to my word and watch these films, that you will have a good time and you won't hate me for maybe recommending you something you don't like. Well, time might tell. If you have already seen these films, or if you see them after I recommend them and you want to call me names, you can do that in the comments. I do want to see if people actually agree with my take that these films should be watched. You can also choose to subscribe, of course. I won't exactly do any more Halloween recommendations for, well, about a year. But I will, once my life becomes a bit more normal, I will resume to making videos. I have some new videos coming out. Of course, I will pursue the Terminator franchise that I'm working on. I will also be uploading some videos about I'll also be uploading some videos where I review video games centered around a story. So yeah, again, more in line with my focus on movies on this channel. If that sounds interesting to you, you can subscribe or stay tuned or whatever. I just hope that you have a great Halloween and that I managed to edit this video in time. Take care and have a spooky night.